Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Second and Saints. John Hendricks alongside Ross Jackson. We're here on a fine, whatever day it is that we're recording all that. All we need to know is it's starting before the new league year gets here next week, all that fun stuff.
You
Whenever
got
you
more
listen
information
to
than
us,
me.
I don't know.
I just need to
That's
know if
right.
the sun's up or the sun's down. That's all I need to know. Sun up, I'm awake. Sun down, I'm asleep. Nice and
Yeah.
easy.
Nah, man. I hear that, man. How you hanging in there, man?
Good, man. Good. I know you and I both did brave the drive to Indianapolis for the combine. So I don't know about you, but it took me a couple days to kind of get back fully going, like get all my energy back. But I'm feeling good, feeling great, ready to get going here, man. How you holding up?
I'm good, man. That drive was a drive. I ended up somehow stopping at two Buc-ee's on the same interstate within hours apart of each other.
I
Just
love it. I
timed it
hit
out that
four
way.
Buckies. I hit four Buckies
Okay.
on the total trip because we did from here to Indianapolis and then from Indianapolis to Atlanta and then from
Okay,
Atlanta
cool.
down here. And then so we hit like that triangle. And so just mad Buckies. Mad
Okay.
Buckies.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing from there?
Well, I just stopped for the
Can't
coffee.
say
It's
coffee.
not,
Ah, I was gonna
yeah, I
say
just
you
stopped
can't
for the
say
coffee.
coffee.
That I like if I could eat smoked brisket, it'd be like I'd love
True.
the ability to be able to stop off and have like a smoked brisket sandwich instead of stopping at
Mhm.
Taco Bell or whatever. Don't get me wrong,
Sure.
but like, yeah. So for me, it's
Some
the
chips.
coffee and the merchandise
Yeah, of course.
and they do have good jalapeno chips. I'm a big jalapeno chip fan, but
Yeah.
I'm taking us all over the place. I'm sorry.
For sure. No, it's cool. That's what you get with this show. You just don't know what's gonna happen. But transitioning segue, what we do know is the new league year's coming for the Saints, and already everybody else for the NFL. We are. It's a Thursday, March 6th, for those who were confused on what day it was or anything like that. And obviously, the Saints have to get under the salary cap. That's something we talked about last show. That we'd expect the restructures to start piling in. The team releases Jamal Williams. Not really surprised there. That's something we probably all saw coming from a mile away.
Mhm.
Then they restructure Eric McCoy, freeing up some cap room. Just your initial thoughts on those two moves alone, because it's a start of a long journey for this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the beginning of it for sure, but they're both sizable moves. I mean, $1.6 million is what they save when it comes to the Jamal Williams release, which isn't a huge amount, but it moves the needle when you're $46 million over the salary cap. And then in the restructure for McCoy, they end up with what is it like $7 million? They end up freeing up there, everything. So it puts them in a really good position, and it kind of closes it up to where they're like 2 or 3 moves away now from getting under the salary cap. So I think those two moves were kind of the big precursor ones. And then we're expecting the bigger moves to come. And then there'll be more to be done after that, right? Because you're not just trying to get compliant, you're trying to get compliant plus a little bit of surplus, right? You're trying to get in the black so you can make some moves and things like that, whether it's re-signing guys or adding new players and everything. But it's a start for what is exactly what you called it. Still a long road, but I think they'll probably end up getting there pretty quickly with just a few moves left to be made to get where they need to be.
Yeah, and everybody's got to remember that they're working to try to get back towards like middle managing of the cap and stuff
Right.
like that. And of course, there's a lot of things that go into it. When you do restructure, you are pushing a lot of things down the road and all this other stuff. Like everybody understands that. And look, you said, Jamal Williams, that might not set the world on fire as far as money goes, but that's a player like a Lucas Patrick. That's like a
Hmm.
Oli Udo
Right.
or somebody like a veteran, maybe in a Kellen
The
Moore
Will Harris.
system or a Brandon Staley system or something.
Hmm.
Yeah, Will Harris is a great one that you might be able to pick up in free agency. And of course, we expect the Saints to be pretty active. Now, active in the sense of, are they going to go gangbusters and sign every big name that's become available? No, but that's kind of the rumor, is like, hey, so and so is available. Joey Bosa is one of the biggest ones. He's got Brandon Staley ties. Well, duh, that makes sense, right? Or
Hmm.
Devontae Adams, he becomes released. He's got ties to Keith Williams and Derek Carr. Could he be in
Hmm.
New Orleans? Like, I mean, it writes itself, right? Like, and of
Right.
course, it depends on where the Saints go. Like, they do need a pass rusher. They do need a wide receiver, another one in the building. So those guys do make sense. But for New Orleans, obviously the big dominoes to fall, like Eric McCoy is a big part of that, right? Like, but
Yep.
Derek Carr's contract, that's the big one. And again,
Yeah.
when we talked about it last show, that was a thing where Saints want him as their quarterback, right? And it's just a matter of the contract. And again, when we were talking last week, the two weren't really close on the as far as the contract, everything that I understand. But
Hmm.
they're going to try to make progress there and try to figure out things. But restructuring Carr would save a lot of money, but there's other players they're going to have to figure out, right? Like you got Cam Jordan to deal with, you got Taysom Hill to deal with, you got to figure out what you're going to do with Tyrann Mathieu, who, oh, by the way, came out and refuted a report saying that he was going to potentially be released and all this other stuff and such. But again, you're going to always hear some things. And when you hear reports like that, sometimes they're worded in a way where it can be right, it could be wrong. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So I guess you leave that door open, then you got a pretty good batting average as is. But your thoughts on the moves that the team has to make and probably what we should expect as far as where they're going to go to get salary cap relief and spend money.
Yeah, I think that the thing with Derek Carr that's most interesting is, do they talk about a reworked deal or do they just go straight to restructuring him? I think they're going to try to get something done first before going about a restructured deal. I don't know that that's an extension by any means, but it could be, a pay cut in exchange for something else. Like, it's got to be a little bit of give and take and all these other things. You definitely don't want to pressure him into a pay cut. It's just not the way that you typically want to operate as an organization, particularly with your starting quarterback. And so, like, you could go that route, but then have the restructure as a fallback, because the restructure is not something that players automatically agree to that when they sign their contract. There's no
Right.
conversation with the player in that situation. And so like, I think, you could say what, $30.996, $30.1 million with a simple restructure of Derek Carr's roster bonus and base salary. If they go
Mhm.
that route, then they're probably one move away from getting compliant with the salary cap. And so I would say that the other moves that I would watch would be a restructure to Cesar Ruiz, which is basically just like what we just saw with Eric McCoy, right? Young player, on his first contract extension, going to be around for a while. Like that, those are the players that you do extend, or excuse me, that you do restructure. Carl Granderson, same thing. And
Mhm.
then probably Pete Werner would be another one
Mhm.
that you could see, an extension. And then after that, like once you get through, not extension, I'm so sorry, I keep doing that.
It's
Restructure.
okay.
My apologies.
I tracked
Uh,
with you. I knew what you meant.
yeah, yeah. After you get through all those restructures, and then after you finish those conversations with Cam Jordan and Taysom Hill's people about, potential pay cuts and everything like that, you do have veterans that you can move on from. But I think the Saints are going to be in a position to where once they do all of those things, you're really only making cuts because people either fit or don't fit in what you're doing next, or their contract value isn't comparable to what their role would be in the future. I think it would be less about cutting players in order to shed salary more than it is cutting players in order to shed role, right? To make a roster spot available for a player to come in and hold a role that's more in line with what it is the Saints are doing on the offensive and defensive side. So there's a few names that come to mind there, but I think that's an important kind of piece of context that, if you start seeing veterans get cut, it's probably less about getting under the salary cap and more about, just what is their expectation for these players in 2025.
Right, and the thing is too, you gotta remember obviously that, they gotta figure out what to do with some of the in-house guys. I mean, again, their free agency class, there's 3 big names, right? Like, and no disrespect to the other guys who are hitting free agent, but what do they do with Paulson Adebo? What do they do with Chase Young? And what do they do with Juwan Johnson? Which
Right.
Juwan Johnson could go find a better deal on the market. Maybe he wants a fresh start. I mean, that's a
Hmm.
potential possibility. Another new tight ends coach, if you will, another new offensive system. I think that's something everybody's got to remember. And same thing on defense is that, they're switching to the 3-4. Uh, I guess the first thing I would say, does Chase Young fit a 3-4? I guess that's because I've seen that a lot. And we talked about last show about that actually could benefit somebody like Carl Granderson and Isaiah Foskey. What about Chase
Yeah.
Young?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think so. I think he has the versatility to do it because he can rush as a stand-up edge rusher while also being able to play down as a run-stopping 3-4 end. Like, I think he has the versatility to do both of those things. I just don't know. I don't know if the production is worth the extension. Like, if you were to do that, or the re-signing, I think like that's the thing that's really my biggest concern. He felt like he rushed the passer better than he ever had in his career, was one of the quotes that he said during his time here in New Orleans. And look, he was a top 10, probably even top 5 pressure guy in the
Mhm.
league at his position, depending upon whose metrics you're looking at. But 5.5 sacks, like there's a big difference between pressures and sacks. And I know that, like, we can't make everything about sacks, but somebody's, if anybody's going to be the double digit guy, it's the guy that's playing that position. And if you're not producing that, then, like, do you keep reinvesting in that, or do you go and
Sure.
try to find the guy that can be that? And so I don't know. I think he could fit it. It's just about, does the allocation of resources make sense if you're not going to get the production that gets the position paid, right?
Yeah.
Typically what we say is $1 million per sack is usually the they end up until a certain point in which it, once you get over like 13 sacks or 12 sacks or
Yeah.
whatever, like you end up skyrocketing after that. But a $5.5 million deal, is that really what you're going to get with them? I don't know. I don't think so. So you might as well just see what happens, and if it works out, then it works out. But otherwise, I think you can find talent to continue to replenish that position.
Yeah, and look, make no mistake about it. Again, last show they do want to bring Paulson, Adebo, and Chase Young back. Like I know that they want those guys back in the building, but again, you look at Paulson, Adebo's market. I think his best fit is to stay in New Orleans. But a team, if he does want to, again, another one that's a fresh starts, want to try something different. What is their vision there? Does Brandon Staley want to use Alante in the slot and put Kool-Aid on the outside, or does
Right.
Kool-Aid go in the slot and then Paulson's their number one corner? Quote unquote. And, I know fans kind of one way or another on Paulson as far as it goes. I think his physical play and stuff, like everybody points to him in the Falcons game, is all that stuff. But look, I think he has a home in New Orleans. It's just, what is his market? And I remember writing about that recently and just kind of saying, using some players last year. And I think that you could probably swing maybe not a long-term deal, but maybe a 2-year deal for him and maybe get it into that $10 to $13 million range. That way he can still get another contract after this one. So
Yep.
I think that's
Yep.
a lot of times what you see a lot of these guys do, 1 year, 2-year deals, because, okay, they got a little bit there. Now maybe they're trying to secure the bag a little bit later.
Yep.
And that could happen. Look at what happened with Zach Bond. So what are your feelings on Paulson Adebo?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And it's funny because Paulson's also one where like I could see him going out there and commanding 7-8 million. You know what I mean? Like I could see there being a market for him on that, because that femur injury is so rare.
Yeah.
And it's one of those injuries that, like, every person that I've talked to about that injury has been like, either inside the facility, outside the facility, has been like, yeah, it's just kind of one of those injuries. You're like, once that's surgically repaired, it's stronger than it was before. And it's not really like a risk of re-injury situation,
Yeah.
And so it makes it really challenging to project what's going to happen with him. But I think you're right. Like, I think that he ends up being a player that could take a more cost-effective deal to stay in New Orleans, go out there, perform once again. Because, I mean, if he plays a full, let's call it 15-game season in 2025, he's going to put up numbers. Like, he's going to do well. He gets interceptions. Like, didn't he finish the season still tied for interceptions on the team with 3? Him and Tyron with 3, if I remember correctly.
Something crazy. Yeah. And his pass
And he
breakups,
played like
all
half the
that stuff. Yeah.
season. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then he's always at the top of the NFL when it comes to things like forced incompletions and pass breakups and things like that. Like, the dude produces. Like, yeah, he gets flagged, but you got to wonder if he gets less flags in a different jersey, everything like that. And so, like, does he want to figure that out in 2025, or does he want to come out here back to New Orleans, do what it is that he knows that he can do? It will be a new system, so that might factor in too. But ideally, I mean, Brandon Staley still wants physical man corners on the outside that can, transition to zone, that have the smarts, that can pattern match. And Paulson Adebo's wide receiver experience can give him that. Like, I think he'd still be a good fit. So, yeah, if he wants to show up in New Orleans again and play well and then potentially, hit the market next year, that works for him and it works for New Orleans, because that's a potential 3rd-round compensatory pick in 2027 in that case. So, like, it's all in exchange.
Yeah, and of course they got new coaches on that side of the ball. No longer, Joe Woods and Marcus Robertson, but
Yeah, the
Terry
loyalties.
Joseph comes in there. I don't know. It's just one of those that you start looking at some of the ties and look at some of the things. What could happen. Could some people follow? Like Seattle's an interesting one. I think they're fascinating because they got the new offense coming in like Saints, and then they move on from Tyler Lockett, and now DK Metcalf wants out in the trade, and there's no way in hell they're getting a 1st and a 3rd round. Like, and him getting like a $30 million contract and all that. Look, there's too much. There's too many wide receivers on the market, in my opinion, and
that's fair.
Coming up in the draft that to say, okay, I feel good about taking my chances or rolling the dice and getting something. But some team will trade for him. I just don't think they're going to get the 1st and 3rd that they want.
Yeah. The thing that makes me think that like the first and third is possible is that that was the AJ Brown trade. And that was
Sure.
on
Yeah.
draft day when
Yep.
draft picks are at their highest value. And
Sure.
Tennessee, fumbled the bag on that, drafting Traylon Burks to try to immediately replace AJ Brown, who they had just traded away. Like, what a move.
Mm, yeah.
Um, and stuff. And so my thing is, okay, yeah, I see that. DK's a little bit earlier than AJ Brown was at that time, a little bit earlier, a little bit older than AJ Brown was
Mm,
at that time, but I can still see a team being willing to do it that feels like they're that piece away and everything like that. So like it could be a way that they go. But yeah, the wide receiver market. And then you think about like a first and third round pick, like the game that I played on Locked On Saints was, would you rather give up a first and third round pick to get DK Metcalf, or would you rather spend a first round pick on Tedero and McMillan out of Arizona and then a third round pick on like Travion Henderson, the running back out of Ohio State? Like
mm,
I'd take the latter 15 times out of 10. DK Metcalf is elite, really,
yeah.
really good
Of
player.
course.
It's not about him being a good player. It's about like what's the best uses of assets for this team in its current NFL life cycle, both draft assets and financial assets.
Well, and of course, think about this. Chris Olave's on the final year of his contract. I
Exactly.
don't know
Yep.
if they're going to do fifth year. Rashid Shaheed, his
Hmm.
contract, another one. Like you think about the future in some aspects, and I get it. The Saints would be like, "Oh, we're not really thinking about the future." Well, yes, you are. You are
Yeah,
thinking about
yeah,
some of that stuff
yeah.
because that is in the back of your mind. And so, look, I'm with you. I'm glad you mentioned Travion Henderson because he was one of my guys in my last
Oh,
3 round mock. I
oh man.
love Travion Henderson. I could see it, and some people were getting on me like, you're talking about this and you're not by getting any defensive tackles or anything like that or guys on the I was like,
This is just a
no,
3 round
it's like
mock.
it was just three. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
there's
I
7
did.
rounds, y'all. Calm
There's
down.
right. Like all the players are gone. There's no more good players left after that. But I went with Tyler Warren, the first pick, and then
Mhm.
I moved it over to Jahad Campbell, and then I went to Travion Henderson, and so that's kind of like where I'm and then
John Gamble. Oh man.
yeah, so I feel like there's ways you can do it. And again, having those picks in the top 150, it depends on where New Orleans figures out where they want to be in this entire scheme, right? Like
Yeah.
they say they want to compete. I think they got to draft and develop. I think the development has been something they severely missed in these past several years. And
Mhm.
again, hopefully they don't have a situation where an Isaiah Foskey learns it too late, and goes to another team and becomes the next Zach Bond. I mean, I think that's a possibility potentially, but there's a lot to figure out there. I mean, maybe he doesn't, but again, you just don't want to have that. But I'm with you. I'd take the picks. It helps your salary cap situation out. I
Mhm.
think you've got some things there. I'd be happy with an Olave Shaheed, Teddy or McMillan wide
Oh,
receiver. I'd love
easy.
Emeka Egbuka too in there, another
Yeah, yeah,
Ohio
yeah,
State guy.
100%.
Or you go down, you can still get somebody
Trey
really good on
Harris,
day three.
Jaden
Day three,
Higgins, like
still there's still good people in day three. And look, you mentioned Treylon Burks. A first round wide receiver is not a guarantee. Nothing is guaranteed with anything. Like, look what Michael Thomas did. All those guys that got picked before him, then he gets picked. He's the one that outshines everybody combined. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I don't know. That's always the fun part is that, you draft mock season. It's like, okay, let's see what they do in free agency. And even in free agency,
right.
they can still address some needs and still go to the draft well. But man, it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, yeah, I can't wait. This is one of my favorite times of the year is like watching all this, getting to the draft, all of this stuff. Like just that like it's fun to be in a situation to where like everything is hypothetical. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this
Yeah,
hypothetically, this is great. Hypothetically, this makes no sense, like whatever it might be, and everything. But like this is what you're waiting for. Like, what can they do? What can every team do? But for us in particular, what can the New Orleans Saints do to bolster their roster, stay young, everything like that? Like the other one that I explored was and you mentioned earlier, like the potential like Devontae Adams edition. The thing that works for me there is that he's still getting paid from the Jets, which I think is
sure.
helpful. So he could potentially take a friendlier deal. I know he said he wants to go to the West Coast, but Devontae, it's not all it's cut out to be. All right, I did that. It's fine. It's okay. It's fine. But like the ability to be able to come back to guys that he knows, like Derek Carr and Keith Williams, I think a lot of people think that he's just going to kind of mindlessly follow Aaron Rodgers. I can't imagine why you do that unless it's also following Aaron Rodgers and getting to the West Coast. Let's say Aaron goes to some West Coast team for some reason. I don't know. Like that could be a thing. But outside of that, I don't know. And so the funny thing about it is, like, when it comes to the idea of getting younger, signing Devontae Adams is a better way to get younger because you're preserving your draft picks, which allow you to get younger. Even though trading for DK Metcalf would technically be getting the younger of the two, you're giving up two young potential players in order to do that. So you're actually hampering yourself in your ability to get younger by going after the younger guy than to go after the older proven guy. You know what I mean? And stuff like that. So like it's such an interesting balance of this or that when it comes to the NFL offseason. So it's always a fun time.
Right. And again, maybe Devontae Adams is somebody that they look at. I mean, it might have
We'll see.
conversations, right? Like that's
Yeah.
the thing is
Yeah.
the ties there. Maybe they have some visits, and visits don't necessarily mean that they're going to sign them or anything like that. But explore some interest, feel them
Yeah.
out. What do you want in your career? What is the thing that you're trying to do? I mean, there's just a lot of things that you can look at. I mean, Keith Williams probably call him up and be like, "Hey, man, what's your thought process?" And then
They
maybe
might be
be an
working
input
out
there.
right now. Like, we don't know.
You
Like, they still
just
like
don't know.
they work
You
together in the
just
off
don't know.
seasons.
Yeah,
Yeah, and if I'm Devontae, I'm in no hurry either, is the other thing.
sure.
Like,
Right.
I'm not worried about showing up to your rookie mini camps or to your mandatory mini camps or your OTAs. Like, I'll sign a contract, go into training camp, and then get ready to ball out in 2025. Like,
Mhm.
I'm in absolutely no hurry. I want to see how your draft class goes. I want to see who else you offer because I don't want you to sign me and then I show up and then you draft the guy that ends up, potentially threatening my playing time, especially in the twilight of my career. I want to be on the field. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he will wait, but if I was him, I'll wait until after training camp or until training camp to even
Yeah.
worry about signing a deal, or I'd be willing to unless the right opportunity shows up. I guess I should say it that way.
Yeah. I mean, and again, somebody like Michael Thomas comes to mind. Like, I think that could have
Right.
been, he maybe could have landed on playoff team. He's not. I don't know if Michael Thomas is going to play football ever again. You know what I'm
Yeah, I
saying?
know.
And
What a
it's a
I mean,
shame, but,
wild. Yeah.
it's a crazy situation to be in, and
Yeah.
so again, there's always those guys that join you right before training camp, the guys who just probably won't sign in the peak of free agency, but free
Mhm.
agency is ongoing. It's not like, oh, we just got these first few days and then free agency is over. It's
Right.
still ongoing through the rest of the NFL season, and so it'll be fun. Juwan Johnson, let's move to him.
Yeah.
A lot of things have been said, a lot of stuff of where he could go, what he could do. Uh, is it time to maybe just move on for both parties, or is it something where maybe they can find a home for Juwan Johnson in this new Kellen Moore offense because he does need a tight end, and he might be the only healthy one they have outside of Dalvin Holker.
Bingo. That's the thing for me is like, what's his role? What's the contract look like? How do those two things compare? Uh, you've got Foster Moreau coming off of injury. You got Taysom Hill coming off of injury. And then behind those guys, you have question marks, right? Dallin Holker, we believe, is very talented, but they haven't put him on the field a ton. So we don't really know. Traylon Welsh and Michael Jacobson have been great practice squad guys. We don't know what they look like out on the field and regular season action and all those other things. And so, you know, re-signing Juwan Johnson, if cost effective, is not a bad decision because it doesn't preclude you from being able to also add more talent at the position. It's just that what we know is that the Saints, I think you and I probably heard the same things, that the Saints want to address tight end probably more than once this
Yeah,
offseason. And
yeah.
so with that being the case, what's the contract value for a Juwan Johnson, which is going to be dictated by other teams' interest in him? And based on that, how willing are you to pay him, even though he might not be your top option? Because by the end of
Mhm.
the draft, you might have a new top option, a Mason Taylor out of LSU, a Harold Fanning out of Bowling Green, Tyler Warren out of Penn State, a Rondé Gadsden out of Syracuse. Like, there's all of these really
Hunter Helm,
solid
Texas.
Hunter. Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
there's all, and these are all day one, day two, and day three guys. As long as Gunnar Helm's ankles feeling okay, I feel so
Sure,
bad for him,
right.
man. That
That was
sucks.
bizarre, right?
That
Like,
stinks. Yeah,
good for him
and
though,
he'll
running it.
right, and like clearly he'll be fine by the time of the season.
Sure.
It's just a sprained ankle. He'll be okay. But like, geez, that stinks. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But anyway, you can't pay him a competitive salary and then go and draft somebody to play above him. You know what I mean? So you got to be understanding of what your holistic plan is at the position. And so a lot of it's going to be dictated by who else is interested in what they're willing to pay him, I imagine.
Yeah, and guys like him, Chase Young, they have void years on their deals. So they're
Hmm.
even if they go somewhere else, they're still going to get paid by the Saints. Like I think Chase
Right.
Young's contract goes through 2029, maybe even 2030, if I'm not mistaken. But same thing with
Jeez.
Juwan. His contract goes, a little bit longer. I mean, there's a chance that they could re-sign him, but there's a chance that they're just going to get stuck with more dead money. And again, it depends if Juwan wants to move on. Again, there's another offensive system. There's another tight end coach you got to work with. And I think that's something to think about when it comes to Juwan, and it just depends. Like, they got to get production from the tight end group, and they just
Right.
haven't in the past few years, whether it be through injury, whether it not be playing Jimmy Graham right, and then just putting him in for like 5 snaps the entire year and he only catches touchdowns. Like, it's really bizarre to me, but that's one area where I would just love to see the Saints finally find an answer. Like, I'm not saying they have to have a George Kittle or Travis Kelsey or somebody like that, or a Brock Bowers, all this other stuff. Like, but get somebody who has that upside, like
Yeah.
a Jonnu Smith from
Yeah.
Miami, what he was able to do with Miami's offense this last year. Somebody in that realm who can put some production together. And look, this isn't a good free agent tight end class. There's a lot of names, but there are also a lot of older names. You know what I mean? Same thing with the offensive line market. A lot of good names out there. A lot of old guys, right? Like, and I say
Right.
old in terms of 30 and up, and I'm old
NFL old.
myself. So,
Yeah.
right, NFL old, quote unquote. But, it's just this time of year, there's so many names that hit the market. And, are you chasing past glory with some of these players? Are you chasing the name? Are you chasing whatever the case may be? And it doesn't always end up working the way you think it will.
It's the really tough balance of, I want to pay the player for what I think he'll do,
Mm,
not for what he's done before. And it's really hard to do that in free agency when you're signing somebody that's coming over from another team, because you have to project what they did in a different system, in a different team, with a different quarterback, in a different environment, with a different play caller, all this other stuff, different opponents, everything like that, different division, yada, yada. And try to say, okay, how does that work for what it is that I want to do? And so how much am I willing to pay? That's why so much of free agency is really kind of off of, well, how much are you being offered elsewhere? And
yeah.
am I willing to do that? You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of teams, and I think the Saints are included in this, oftentimes will set a price before they know the name, right?
Yep.
This is what we like to pay for this, for who we're going to rely on to do this. And whoever that person is, if they're willing to say yes to that, then great. If they're not willing to say yes to that because they're getting offered somewhere else, see ya. And I think you see that around the NFL, like the whole Matt Stafford trade thing. The entire Matt Stafford go out there and seek a trade was, go out there, seek a trade, find out how much they'll pay you on an extension, come back to us, tell us what that number is, and we'll tell you if we'll do it or not. Like,
Yeah.
that's really all that was. That was letting other people negotiate his extension with the Rams. And that's a wise move because it's effectively the open market. So how do you use the open market to your advantage? That's how they did it in those situations, or in that situation. So yeah, I think it's a little bit tough to project all that. Like, I don't envy teams having to do that. Like, that's what your pro personnel scouting department is doing, and what your contract guys are doing, and all this stuff. Like, it is not an easy task at all to try to project all that.
Right. And of course, Monday, the legal tampering period opens. And what that
Yes.
means is that teams can enter negotiations with agents, but there is no visits. There's no communication with players, which, let's face it, I feel like that's just a surface level thing. But, that could be a situation with Juwan, though. Like, hey, what is, yeah, time machine.
I
But,
did very heavy air quotes during all
But I
that.
mean, what Juwan is like, look, we want to have you back. We understand. Go see what these other teams are looking, because we know you're going to be a
Right.
hot commodity on the market. Come back to us. Let's see if we can work something out before free agency. And it's a quick turnaround. Maybe same thing with Paulson. Maybe the same thing with Chase Young. I mean, if I'm a player, yeah, I'm trying to figure that out and see what's
Yeah.
going to happen. Chase Young is going to get paid money, right? Like, that's just how pass rushers go. And I mean, you just had a big contract extension for, some of these guys and stuff, like Saquon getting a bag and Zach Bond getting a bag and stuff. And so,
Yep.
again, there's going to be, and then pass rushing market is going to be crazy, because there's a lot of guys that are going to want to get paid too, because they've seen some of the recent deals, and that dictates the market as well. So I don't know how that can work out, but I see that as a realistic play. New Orleans will be in that space. Again, we expect them to be active. What that means is, it doesn't mean that they're going to sign all the top 5 names that everybody says, oh, well, this player, he did it one thing, or he did those things. That's the team, Saints are the team that's going to definitely sign him.
Yeah.
Doesn't work that way.
Right.
Like, it might
Right.
work on Madden, but it doesn't work on this. You know what I mean? So it's just how it rolls.
Yeah, 100%. If I'm the Saints, I'm focused on finding a new left guard, starting left guard in
Yeah.
free agency. I'm willing to spend my money there, and then
Yes.
I'll 1 year, 2 year contract my way through the rest of free agency. Like they have a 90-man roster to fill. They're going to add players. Remember,
Yeah.
only the 51 highest paid or highest cap hits actually count against the salary cap. So after a certain point, you can start adding players that don't actually impact your salary cap, and so or impact it by like hundreds of thousands of dollars as opposed to millions and millions of dollars. But
Yeah.
like if a this is pie in the sky, but if they do go the route of restructuring Derek Carr, they become a little bit more players in free agency because they'll have more money in order able to spend. And if a guy like Mekhi Becton becomes available, because the Eagles paid Zach Bond, they paid Saquon Barkley, they got to decide if they're going to pay Mekhi Becton, if they're going to pay Milton Williams, they're going to pay what is it, Brandon Graham, I think is the other one. Like there's other players they got to kind of
Yep.
figure out like what are they going to do in all those situations. Like one of those guys might walk. Whichever one of them walks, I'm going after. But if it's Mekhi
Mhm.
Becton in particular, like I want a new starting left guard, I'm going to go get a guy that I know can do that, and that did it in my new head coach's system. If I'm Mickey
Yeah.
Loomis, you know what I mean. So like I could see the Saints going out and doing that, and then he's a 1 year deal for this receiver, a 1 year deal for this linebacker, a 1 year deal for this defensive tackle, like whatever it might be, everything like Tier Tart, $2.5 million deal, like kind of a thing. Like you
Mhm.
don't have to break the bank elsewhere in order to be able to do it. So I think they'll be active 100%, but which could mean, more deals get done than maybe last year. Maybe a bigger deal gets done than maybe last year. But I agree with you. They're not going to be out here, you know, tossing dollars or anything like that. Like they're going to be
Right.
very fiscally responsible in terms of how they go about this because they want to get back to. I think they're going to operate at a deficit just about every year. Like that's what they want to
Mhm.
do, but they want to get to a place where they can operate at a deficit that's more manageable than what happened after the COVID year.
Yeah, and look, in talking to Kellen Moore, he stressed the trenches a lot, right?
Big time,
Like
big
both
time.
sides of the ball, the trenches. So again, a left guard has to be that priority. I'm not drafting an interior offensive lineman with first or second round pick. We just don't. I don't like that thing. If it
No,
was a tackle, a future guy who's going to start in
sure,
5 to 10 years, like what they got in Taliesin Fuanga, sure, that makes sense.
100%.
Or
Hmm.
Olu Fashanu, some of
Right.
those guys, but I'm not using it on an interior offensive line. You can go on to lay it well into day 2 or early day 3 and address that, and it'll be fine. And something
Yeah.
else about the free agency is something to keep in mind. The Saints are going to lose probably most of their free agents there because John Benton, Andrew Janunga, all those guys up in Seattle. I
Great point.
guarantee you that Oli Udo, Shane Lemieux, Lucas Patrick, even guys like Landon Young, all 4 of those guys have a really good chance of landing up there in Seattle. Now, Lucas Patrick's coming off a really big injury, so that might not go as fast as they want it to there. And if he wants to continue playing football, all that other stuff. But a guy like Landon, if he doesn't, he's got versatility. John Benton knows all about him. The Saints offense, the Seahawks coaches now who were
Hmm.
with the Saints offense, they know about him. That could be easy, move for them as well. But the Saints, I'm looking at their interior offensive line depth. It's not there, right? Like you've got Eric McCoy, you've got Cesar Ruiz, who we know he's coming off of a down year, but they believe a lot in Cesar and the
Hmm.
the play he can put out on the field, and maybe Brendan Nugent's return will help with that as well. But
Yep.
outside of that, you have Nick Saldivari, who had some injuries that dealt with. He looked like he was going to be this team's starting left guard. Injuries again, that sucks. And then Kyle Hergel is your other option. So
Right.
the need to address the offensive line is glaring. And same thing on the opposite side of the ball because you have a lot of free agents and you just got to figure this thing out. So it wouldn't surprise me. Most all of the moves would be in the trenches.
Yeah. Yeah. It would. Yeah. I'm right there with you too. Because really, you want your starting five plus three. Like you want three guys that you
Yes,
can trust to kind of move in and out and play different positions and everything like that and be your depth
especially the
piece.
Saints.
Right. Yes. Yeah. 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 As they're trying to figure out their injury situation and all that kind of stuff. Like ideally, they're in a better situation with that in 2025 with Wrath and everything. But I don't know. I don't know if you can expect that to really all turn around in just one season. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, is there remnants of it, even if it's improved? So I think you want your starting five plus three. On the defensive side, you're still going to want a rotation on your defensive line because you're trying to outlast offensive linemen throughout a game into the fourth quarter, into late downs, all those other things. Like you're still going to want that. And so I think there's going to be a lot of investment continuously in the trenches, and we'll see if there's changes in those trenches too. And I think you'll see some defensive free agents end up heading elsewhere. Like Like, couldn't you see Paulson Adebo and Ugo Amadi following Marcus Robertson to where do you go? The Raiders? Yeah, the
Raiders,
Raiders.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
man, it would make so much sense,
Will Harris Will Harris could
Will
go there
Harris.
too.
Yep.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it would make sense.
Yeah. So like, I think there's some of that to consider for sure on both sides of the football.
Yeah, and again, we're in such a short time crunch now, and with it being Thursday, March 6th, the new league year starts on March 12th, and so in the next several days, it's going to be busy, right? Like you're going to
Flurry.
get more restructures, you're going to see more players get released, you're going to see more of those guys that you're like, man, I didn't realize. Like the Joey Bosa thing caught me way off guard. Maybe I just don't follow the Chargers enough in some aspects. I didn't know necessarily that was going to be a direction they go or a possibility, but him becoming available just really kind of one of those shocking things. The same thing with DK Metcalf being a guy that's open. Tyler Lockett getting released. That's not really that surprising. Hunter Renfrow saying he does want to play football this season, contrary to popular report that came out there. That's interesting too. So I don't know. It's a good time for the football world, but a lot to work to manage and to really, frankly, keep an eye on.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. I think there will be surprises, and there will be surprises in New Orleans. I'm curious to see what those surprises are. Are they
Yeah,
surprises in the detriment of the Saints, or are they surprises in the benefit of the Saints? But I think it's going to be a very entertaining offseason, and I'm glad that we get to do this.
absolutely, absolutely. The last thing I want to kind of hit on before we do
Yeah,
get out of here is because I've seen it all of the stuff with Derek Carr, right? Like
sure.
that's where they fit. I think they're going to find the sweet spot, and he's going to end up being their quarterback. But my question to you is, what is the plan after Derek Carr, right? Because like this is fine and dandy. You want to go compete. Maybe this is you keep Cam, DeMario, and Tyron. This is your year to compete and try to push the chips in. But after that, let's say Carr's not your quarterback. Where are you going in 2026? And I don't think the Saints have that plan because they didn't with Drew Brees and it hurt them.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? So I would imagine, based on the construction of the roster, excuse me, sorry, based on the structure of the coaching roster, right, the coaching staff, that they're going to be interested in developing a young quarterback. Now, does that development start with Spencer Rattler in 2025 and then continue on, or does that development get underway in practice in 2025? I mean, 2026. I don't know, but the reason why that I feel that way is former quarterback in Kellen Moore, former NFL quarterback in Kellen Moore, former NFL quarterback in Doug Nussmeier, former NFL quarterback in Scott Tolzien. That's your head coach, your offensive coordinator, and your quarterback's coach. Typically, when you do that, you're saying something. It's what the Panthers did. It's what the Texans did. Well, not what the Texans did. I'm sorry, but we've seen it with these other teams that have been trying to like develop and get a lot of development out of their young quarterbacks. And so I would imagine that. Oh, it was with the Colts did. That was the other team that did that. I would imagine that is the direction that New Orleans is looking to go, is to start developing a young option behind Derek Carr. I just don't know if that development starts in 2025 or starts in 2026. I think Spencer Rattler and Jake Haener get to benefit from it in 2025, no doubt about it. And I think that both of those guys will get and should get their opportunities to be able to kind of prove in the background, ideally, that they are showing that development. And I think I feel like we'll probably start to see the team commit a little bit more to Spencer Rattler than they did last year. It's where it was like, half Spencer Rattler, half Jake Haener. We're giving everybody snaps. How fun. I think that it's going to probably become a little bit more focused on Spencer Rattler over the course of 2025, unless they add competition, which is
Yeah.
an option. So we'll see where things go, but that's what I imagine. I don't think they have the this is what we're going to do after Derek
Mhm.
Carr name at the moment, because I think they want to add more names to that conversation by the time that they're ready to make that decision.
Yeah, and you got to realize that maybe they do want to go the free agency route. Again,
Right?
that
Never
could
know.
be the play here. And the thing is, if I'm Spencer Rattler, even if Derek Carr is the quarterback, right? Like, be ready, right? And that doesn't mean any
100%.
disrespect to Derek, but you got to make it through the whole entire season. And we've seen
Hmm.
like the random injury that took him out in the Chiefs game. You know what I mean? Like that was a
Right.
weird one in itself. And so again, if you're Spencer Rattler, yes, you can benefit from the guys on the coaching staff. he knows what he needs to work on in the offseason. And as a rookie going to the second year, it does make a big difference. And I could see him making a bigger leap this year. And of course, what does that look like for Jake Haener? Ben DiNucci's still on the roster. He has familiarity with this entire, Cowboys / Saints new coaching
Right.
staff / Eagles, whatever you want to call it. And so I think that's obviously another thing to keep an eye out on. But again, for the Saints fans, I just want to know what the plan is. Like, I'd be like, okay, we don't want to be left the same thing in limbo because the team did not prepare for life without Drew Brees, right? Like
Right.
they just didn't. And they could say they did, they could say, oh, well, this other stuff, but there was nobody that could jump in. They thought that said, well, we just have free agents that can pick up where Drew left off. But, it just didn't work out. And I don't want to
Yeah.
see that happen because you could make some progress this season, but then you can regress the next season if you don't have a plan in place. And
100%.
I don't know. And I'm not sitting here telling you that Derek Carr is going to win 12 games for him or 10 games for him or whatever the case may be. But
Yeah.
it's just a fact that a new coach, new rosters, all this other stuff, you could have a better season potentially. They got to go play the games. The new coaches, it's exciting. They still got to go play the games and coach and teach the game. Players got to last the season. But there is upside for the Saints team, especially when you go 5-12. I mean, that's just kind of a given. But
Hmm.
it's a long path until we get there. But I do feel like that is one of the questions I want to see is what is the long-term plan for the Saints team at quarterback?
Yeah. I hope that they focus their efforts, unless they add another player. My hope is that they focus their efforts on Spencer Rattler.
Yeah.
Just as a developmental background guy, I'm not saying that they should be focusing on him as a potential starter here in 2025, but I I just I don't know, man. I think that they could have been better in those games without Derek Carr if there wasn't so much of this. Well, we like both. Well, we like both. Well, we
Yeah.
like both. And I get it. Sometimes it's hard to pick your favorite kid. Everything like that. I understand that. Uh, but man, like sometimes, like in this situation, it really turned into, even though Spencer Rattler got all the starts, but one, it felt like that whole, if you got two quarterbacks, you don't have any, right? Thing, but behind your starter, which is a like disastrous situation. If you don't have a guy that you're fully committed to behind your starter, it feels like I just hope that they go that route and that they fully commit to what that's going to look like.
Yeah, and you can't worry about feelings when you go apologize to the Falcons. So I mean, it's just
Yeah,
like,
right,
and just don't care about the players' feelings. You know what I'm saying? And of course, that's been
right,
a long time, but
yeah.
at the same time, practice what you preach, all that fun stuff. Well,
Hmm.
look, we got a lot more to talk about on Second and Saints, but obviously we talk a lot about other things Saints related until we're back. So, Ross, what have you got coming up on Locked On and LouisianaSports.net?
The answer
It's
is
in the lab.
yes.
Yeah.
Everything,
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
Mock draft Mondays continue.
Mm.
Continuing to break down kind of free agency fits and things like that as well. Just put a piece out in terms of why the New Orleans Saints should avoid conversation around TK Metcalf. Just leave it be unless that price drops big time and everything like that. And so it'd be a lot of like looking at upcoming acquisitions and salary cap stuff. Salary, like John, salary cap stuff's like some of my favorite stuff in the world.
Yeah.
I love like breaking down, okay, well, they did this and then this, and then this gets prorated over this many years and all this stuff. So that'll be another thing that I'll have like a keen focus on, as well as tracking all the top 30 visits, because that's also going on as the NFL draft approaches too. So whole bunch going on over at both LouisianaSports.net and over at Locked On Saints. What do you have coming up over at Athlon? You've taken
Man,
on
we
more
got
more sites. Like you've got writers. Like my man's
we
employing people. Like I love it.
it's crazy. Yeah, we're building a little bit of an army over here, and I'm excited about the direction it's going. So yeah, I did pick up LSU and Pitt athletics, from on Athlon, and so Saints coverage still stays the same. I'm excited about some of the things that are coming there, and same thing with LSU. Just it's cool, I'm excited about the pro days that are coming up too, and just kind of where things are going. You said top 30 visits, seeing who meets with who, and trying to get
Mhm.
some more intel on some of these players and do some homework. And look, I think there's good ways to find, good players through the gyms. And some of that comes with some of the conversations that we have from some
Yep.
of these things that happen in Indianapolis and all that. And so starting to put out more, obviously it's free agency, still emphasis on the draft, but the draft kind of takes a backseat to everything free agency and all this other stuff. But once free agency, like the height, the peak of it, it's back to draft profiles. What are the Saints going to do? What are we hearing? All that other fun stuff. And
Yeah.
the owners meeting is going to be at the end of the month too. So it'll be a chance for us to talk to Kellen Moore a little bit more after some of these moves have been made, the coaching staff finalized and all that, which most of it is about finalized, right? So it's just a matter of announcing who else is left that hasn't been revealed already. So
Yep.
fun times as always.
What a time.
What a
What a
time
time
to
indeed.
be alive, right? Like every single time. And yeah, it's just great, man. So look, I appreciate you as always, Ross. It's fun doing these together. A lot of fun stuff brewing in the lab and behind the scenes stuff that nobody knows about. And so I'm excited to see where everything goes. And man, it's going to be a hell of a 2025. That's what I hope for, at least. And I know
Yeah,
you do
100%.
too. So
Yeah, without a doubt.
good deal. Well, guys, that's going to do it for us today on our episode of Second and Saints. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe button, spread the word, all that fun stuff. Check us out on the interwebs, all that fun stuff and jazz. And look, we just want to tell you we appreciate you tuning in and giving us the time of day. And as always, our DMs are open, our emails are open, the chat comments are open. We'll look at all of that good stuff. So until next time, on behalf of Mr. Ross Jackson and John Hendricks, signing out for Second and Saints. Y'all be good people.
Love you.